Cornwall City Council met Monday night for a special meeting and a special presentation to do with the remediation plans for the site just located adjacent to the number 2 Fire Hall on 2nd Street. Joining me now is Mayor Bernadette Clement to speak more about it. Welcome back to the show, Madam Mayor.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, so as I alluded to, there was a presentation done about the groundwater that does have 2 harmful chemicals in it, and it's creeping a little bit closer each year to the Cornwall Fire Hall, and so we'll talk about your reaction to that presentation.
Well, I mean, it was very concerning, and it was important for us to have that meeting in a very public forum so that the public can be aware of what the city is going to be dealing with. So essentially, our city property has a fire hall on it with city employees, firefighters working there. And there have been wells installed on that piece of property for a number of years now because, the situation has been monitored by the Ministry of the Environment. So now in these recent months, those wells have indicated through constant monitoring that there's now some leaching of contaminants potentially onto the city property where our fire hall is located.
And of course, this all stems from the fact that the land adjacent to the fire hall, of course, was Courtauld's property. It was basically used as the dump for many years. I guess the relief in this, if there is any, is the fact that it has been well monitored and we know ahead of time that we can be a little bit proactive about this.
Yeah, I think that's a good point in terms of saying that there is an engineering firm that is being paid for, right, by the owners of the adjacent property. They like to use the words landfill and not dump, right? But you're right, that adjacent property, which was historically owned by Courtauld, had quite a significant landfill on that site. And so the purchasers of Courtauld now own that property and are responsible for any monitoring and also the cost of remediation. So that's going to be significant, but it's not going to be a cost that's going to be borne by the city or by the residents of Cornwall.
And that's always welcome news, of course. Now, of course, on the human level, the worry, of course, has always been, for the people, the staff working at the fire hall, and of course, in the presentation, the risk that this poses to them was deemed little, but of course, there is concern.
There's always concern, I think, and I would say that is our main concern. So last night, the public and city council had a chance to have this presentation and ask a lot of questions of the engineering firm that's going to be monitoring and doing some of the remediation. But the firefighters and the city employees were meeting with that same engineering firm today so that they could have their questions answered. Because, whenever you hear the word risk, you start to worry. These chemicals could be linked to occupational disease of some sort. Last night, we heard that it would take potentially 56 years of full-time work exposure. But, what does that mean really? And, what about if some people have more of a propensity to an occupational disease or a cancer? So these are all questions that, are of concern. The city also has lawyers that are going to be looking into this because we have to make sure that, our employees and our interests, the interests of our residents, are top of mind. So we're going to have legal counsel reviewing this as well. So I think what I would say to the people of Cornwall is that they have to stay tuned, and we'll have to continue to be very transparent about how this file is working out. But top of mind, always the health of city employees and city residents.
And when we talk about city residents, of course, and the importance of being stay tuned, or staying in tune, I should say, we do know that there is residential property along there as well on 2nd Street and Donny, and new houses going up as part of the new subdivision development. So maybe what is your words to those residents that may have concerns about being so close to that property?
Right. So I mean, they should certainly direct questions to the city, and then we can make sure that those questions get to Ministry of the Environment. They can also contact the Ministry of the Environment directly, because the MOE, Ministry of the Environment, has a local office here and can also respond to questions from the public. So I think it's fair to send people there as well. People who are in new subdivisions, they'll want to talk to the developer of where they're living as well. So there's different places where they should be asking questions. And of course, stay tuned, stay connected with the city, because we're going to, of course, be as transparent as possible with all of this information. But I would say that the Ministry of the Environment is probably going to be the number one source of information. You know, I live in the East End, and on my way home after that meeting, I took a drive down, you know, just to sort of lay eyes on the location. And I think, you know, we need to take a close look at that property and what's around that property, and we need to stay in contact with the Ministry of the Environment.
Absolutely. And the other piece of big municipal related news came last week with further funding announcements in terms of provincial funding for COVID relief, which will include help with transit, COVID related expenses, and as well as the Social Services Relief Fund.
Yeah, so this was welcome news. You know, I have to say 2020 has been so challenging for all of us, really, but also from a municipal perspective, it's been difficult. And then the last council meeting, we talked about the financial impact, right, on the city related to COVID-19. So this news that came right after that financial council meeting discussion was helpful. And they're calling it the Safe Restart Fund, so the SRF. And it's basically the province with, of course, partnership with the federal government, saying to Cornwall and to the 444 municipalities in Ontario that they recognize that we are going to have struggles. They recognize that that's going to have an impact on revenues and ultimately taxes for residents. And so they have started to announce allocations per household. So we have an announcement saying there's about 2.7 million coming under that fund, and then a separate $687,000 coming to compensate for the transit loss of revenue. So this is good news. And of course, we are going to be signing agreements saying we're going to be accountable for those funds. They're basically to cover a lot of operating costs related to COVID-19. And if we can't use those, then we'll be able to put them in reserves to be able to continue to use them as we move forward through the pandemic, right? So we don't know when the pandemic is ending. We don't know if there's going to be a second wave. So it's hard to calculate what that financial impact is going to be. But the province and the federal government are telling us that this money is allocated to our region, and we are going to be able to show how it's going to be used and keep it in reserves to move forward through the pandemic.
Excellent, and it's welcome news as well that help is coming to municipalities, and we know every municipality in Canada is feeling the strain of COVID-19. On that note, Madam Mayor, thank you so much for joining me for this update.
Thank you to your TV. Always happy to be here.